Welcome back to the Single Malt Review. Dave here, and Tim joining us very soon. Special guest star Islay the cat.
Islay,
wonderful cat.
most elusive of the whisky kittens. This is in fact Campbell's sister, but she's not very gregarious.
No.
So she's going to squirrel away very, very fast. Or are you going to stay? You're just waiting for your moment to escape, aren't you? Which I won't deny you. You can go when you like. But yes, she's very, very nice. She doesn't cause trouble like some of the other awful cats like Mingus and Sybil, but she's very, very retiring, so it's a, here we go. Alright, not to make this just a cat video, what are we tasting, Dave?
Well, we've had one brief foray into the world of Canadian whisky before, at least I have, when I tried the lamentable, forgettable cinnamon fireball. That is nominally a base
we have tasted, or
Canadian
one of us
whisky.
have tasted Canadian whisky before.
With all kinds of awfulness laid on top of it, which you literally can't drink because it will actually poison you.
Well, poison's a harsh word, but I won't react well, that's for certain.
Plus, I'm now trying actual, factual, honest-to-goodness Canadian whisky via the classic 12-year-old Canadian Club. This is a blended Canadian whisky, bottled at 40% ABV, matured, I believe, in ex-bourbon casks. So, I'm actually keen to try this. As far as I'm aware, I've not ever tried it in the past. This will be possibly my first experience of Canadian whisky as God intended, with no artificial cinnamon on it. I
see Canadian Club in the liquor store all the time, and it's always, for its age, conspicuously cheap. I've walked past bottles of Canadian Club, allegedly 21 years old, and the cheapest 21-year-old anything you'll find anywhere. You couldn't get them for sort of
loose change.
80 New Zealand dollars, which is about, goodness, that's about, I don't know, 40, 50 bucks in the US, actually taking shipping into account. I wouldn't be surprised if you can pay $30 odd US for a bottle of their 21-year-old. It is stonkingly affordable, but as for what it is intrinsically, we had a very hard time actually looking that up. It's a blended whiskey, so that's a bit of an odd term in the in the States, because the States doesn't really make blended whiskey.
We're north of the border, we're into Canada proper, hence why it's whiskey with a Y instead of an EY.
Yeah, so it's good to see. We're dealing with a place that's, in terms of how they put their whiskey together, is very much like America. We're dealing with the same sort of, corn-based spirit, but I believe we are. But again, I could be wrong, and we could find so little about this that if anyone has some hard info, people from the region probably know better than us, so please post up. That's how we learn half our facts here, by getting things wrong. Yes. Part of the magic. So this is the 12 years old. It is aged in American white oak. I would be highly unsurprised if that meant out the road, Islay. Nice it is to see you not running away. Oh no, she's off. Never mind. She did well better than I thought she would have.
Ex-bourbon cask
can assume that means ex-bourbon, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
They're right there.
No mention of coloration or filtration on any of the sources we could find, so we can assume both in play, possibly.
Yeah. For used bourbon, this is just a hair too dark for my... Well,
especially at 40%.
It tickles my suspicions anyway. So, and chill filtration, certainly, I think... I would just expect a bit of cloud. Was this not? Anyway, that's the taxonomy out of the way. What is the nose?
Ooh, that is...
It's pretty scrummy, actually.
Yeah, that's quite a sweet bourbon-esque nose. I think there's some degree of rye in there.
I think bourbon-esque is right. It's bourbon with a whole lot of butterscotch on top.
Yeah.
If there was... I always try to refine my tasting notes into one discrete thing, and for me, this is sticky date pudding. There's a whole lot of sticky date pudding on here. There is sort of ginger, date, vanilla, and butterscotch all over the top. And that really sums this whiskey up for me. It's quite concise.
The sticky date pud, one of my favourite indulgent desserts.
It's very, very sweet. It is conspicuously sweet on the nose. Whereas bourbon is very, very spicy. This is not so much. There is a little bit of clove, mace, cinnamon, but really only around the outsides. It's just a garnish on top of this really, really puddingy kind of whiskey. I would sort of relate this to... This is almost like how maybe even Glendronach is to other Scotch whiskies, other Scotch whiskies being bourbon in this particular analogy. It's very, very, very sweet. Let's see what's on the palate.
That is alarmingly sweet. It tastes quite young for a 12-year-old. There's quite a bit of fire there.
There is a bit of burn.
There's a lot of very rich, sweet, desserty cakes, puddings, spices.
That's weird. For me,
Dried
that's the alcohol hit is pretty real on that, and it almost comes in two waves. There's a sort of a sweetness up front with that sort of butterscotch manifesting on the tip of the tongue. Then there's a big sort of whack of alcohol heat, and then you get a few more gingery, vanilla, rich notes, and then you get the heat again. It's sort of almost like a
heat sandwich.
Through the oscilloscope of my palate. That's got sort of 2 bars on it. Give it a wee bit of water.
Yeah, that is curious. Now, it is only 40% and a 12-year-old spirit.
Yeah, pretty keen stuff.
Yeah, that's a curious juxtaposition. That strength, that age, but that amount of vigorous warmth. I really want to know the mash bill for this now, and what's actually gone into it.
It is peculiar. I think it's
like a very sweet, very mellow bourbon.
Off the top of my head, off the tip of my tongue, I would say this is almost a bit of a hybrid between American whiskey and Scotch. I think it has... If there isn't corn in here, I'd be manifestly surprised. Similarly, rye. Wheat, I'm not sure. I'm not great on picking up wheat. I just don't have the experience. But there is definitely malted barley in here.
It's got a lot more bourbony with the addition of a little water.
Yeah. Of course, there's malted barley in almost all bourbon.
Yeah.
Because, well, they need it unless they use synthetic amylase to mash their bill and mash their corn. All bourbon has a little bit of malted barley. This, I think, has a wee bit more. This might have up to sort of 30, almost 40%, I think.
Huh.
Similarly with the grains, I think there's grain we don't normally see coming out of American whiskey. It's grainy in the way that some Scottish grain whiskies are. So it's quite a conundrum. It's very, very difficult.
It is bringing back some hallmarks of Loch Lomond's pure grain whiskey, as we've visited quite recently.
If anyone knows exactly what's in here, I'd love to know in the comments. Because, like I say, we looked. I mean, we spent a whole 10 minutes rummaging around for that.
And considering the massive market dominance a Canadian club have on Canadian whiskey internationally, you think there'd be more info out there. But
we could find exactly bugger all on how it was actually put together in terms of its mash bill, in terms of its method of distillation, in terms of a great many things. I think this is a blend of continuous and pot still, like almost everything produced on the North American continent. But beyond that, any info would be good info. Like I say, it's how we learn things here in the Single Malt Review, by people telling us when we're wrong.
That aside, let's think of some scores.
Yeah, shall we? Let's lump it in with bourbon. Let's say it's competing with the bourbon.
I'll treat it as its own thing. It's got a lot of the sweeter, gentler characters of bourbon, but not the it's sort of taken elements from the fact that it's an older whiskey, a full 12 years, but also that it's a blended whiskey, and also that it's got some genealogy shared with bourbon, and it's sort of a little bit weak overall. I think it's got some of the sweetness you get from bourbon and from certain blended whiskies, but sort of the gentler properties, so it doesn't have the quite as much of the vigour, the depth of character as those. So it gets 80 for me.
Yeah,
it's not wanting for qualities.
Fair enough.
Just it's a bit.
It's a whiskey that
not sure where it lies overall.
It's a whiskey that, well, it may know where it's coming from, but I don't. I have trouble really nailing this one down and seeing, like, what the theme is, what the idea is. That initially, and still in the nose, that incredible dominant butterscotch just doesn't really follow through in the palate. It kind of changes into slightly more austere, different things. And
it's almost a bit of bait and switch. Every hint is followed up by something completely different.
I mean, it's something we've never tasted before, discounting Dave's Fireball whiskey experience.
Which I'm always happy to do. I'm discount that as far as I possibly can.
Which is not really applicable to the exercise.
Yeah.
This is not something we've ever tried. I think what I'd really like to do is see if we can narrow down a mini of the 21-year-old, because that should be very, very attainable. I know they're out there, and that's something I'd really like to try, because that would be far and away the oldest North American whiskey we have ever tried, and almost the oldest North American whiskey that tends to exist. It just doesn't get older than that. So I'd be fairly fascinated to try that. As it is, this one, I mean, it's a 79 for me, so very, very close to Dave's score. I think we're kind of in agreement here. It's a little too weird for what we're into, which is maybe not to be. It's not unexpected, because Canadian whiskey, it was always really made to mix. It was a blending thing. It was made because it was a bootlegging thing, you know. Whole television series that we made about it. When Prohibition was rife in the States, it was not so in Canada. They being the closest sort of distilling nation, discounting Mexico with the tequila industry probably not being quite what it is today, Canada was the closest source of distilled spirits, and so a lot of it came across the border through various pathways, and it was always made to sell immediately. You know, it was produced to move, and so the implication was that you were going to mix this. Only an idiot would drink this straight, because it was so rough and ready. And that's sort of what the Canadian distilling sort of industry itself was born out of, with a sort of idea. I mean, the first old-fashioned and the first a lot of these prototypical American cocktails were probably made out of bootleg whiskey to begin with. They were born out of bootleg whiskey, born out of Prohibition, and it would conceivably been Canadian whiskey that birthed a lot of these things. It was always made to blend. So to have it this old is probably very, very different from the sort of original ideal of Canadian whiskey. It was made to kind of fill a hole that Prohibition created. And having it age this long, and maybe we're drinking it out of its element, I don't know. But yeah, if anyone's got thoughts, post us up.
The style was undoubtedly matured, evolved a lot over the last 70 to 80 years post-Prohibition, so...
It's an interesting and an odd thing, and one we can genuinely say we know nothing about.
Yes.
So yeah, please educate us if you've got any good info there. We are indeed here to learn. We have one of the most functional audience participation programs than the internet has ever devised, in that we actually learn things from the comments, and that's why our comments are always so good. So. That'll just about do us for this session from the Single Malt Review. I suspect I can't even count how many whiskies we've done. That's how far down the hole we are in. So I'll say, Sludger, keep safe, and we will be right back with something new and different very, very soon.